Welcome back, everybody. How's it going? Today, I want to talk about something different. I've said from time to time I'd like to branch off and talk about different things besides just horror movies. And today I want to do that. Today, I want to talk about my interest in the superhero genre. I would definitely consider myself or categorize myself as a casual superhero fan compared to horror movies, very very casual. I mean, I can what's the right way to put this? People just think that since I haven't seen every single Marvel and DC movie that's come out in the last 20 years, oh, you're a shit fan, you're not good. You know what I mean? I could say the same thing about somebody that hasn't seen every single Halloween movie, every single horror movie that's out there. You know what I mean? I could say the same thing about them, but I don't do that. I'm just a different level of a fan. Now, the reason I wanted to talk about this is because I know that it's a very, very popular subject. I know that there are huge superhero fans out there. Now, I'm really not one of them. Nothing against it. It's just something that, as I got a little older, out of my childhood years, something just didn't grasp me and keep me coming back for more. I kind of peaked at my interests of what I loved as a kid. So really, what it all boils down to is, there's a small, what's the right way to put this? Like a small clique of superhero material that I'm very fond of and that means the world to me. You know, yeah, I'm just going to start off by saying, I'm more of like the big guns kind of guy. Like with, how like people are with the slashers. They care about Michael, Freddy, Jason, Ghostface, Chucky, so on and so forth. But a fan like me loves every other freaking horror character out there. But when it comes to superheroes, I'm more like a Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, classic X-Men kind of guy. I'm not gonna lie to you. I didn't know what the hell the Avengers even was until that movie came out. I had no idea what the heck Guardians of the Galaxy was until I went to the movie theater with a buddy of mine and kind of fell asleep. Not gonna lie. It just something about the superhero genre just never hooked me like horror or like some action movies, where I really felt just grasped by a character like Indiana Jones. Obviously, not just because of Harrison Ford, but because of the adventure action aspect of it just had me coming back for more. Spider-Man didn't do that for me, not even as a kid. Batman didn't do that for me, not even as a kid. But yeah, I was a 90s kid, and basically my first introduction to superheroes, I'd say, was the 90s cartoons, which even as a man in my 30s, I could watch Batman the animated series every single day. Every single day. I could watch the X-Men animated series from the 90s every single freaking day. Same thing with the Spider-Man show. Those were just freaking classic, awesome on every single tier. So when it comes to things like that, I'm gonna start with Batman. This is probably gonna be a little bit longer of a video because I want to go in detail because I know it's important to some people and a lot of people do really enjoy the superheroes. When it comes to Batman, people might think there's probably people out there that think this is weird. Some people that don't, but Michael Keaton will always be my Batman. Yes, I grew up with the Tim Burton and the Schumacher films, Batman 89, Batman Returns, Batman Forever, and Batman and Robin. Yes, that's what I grew up with as a kid, and those four films do hold a special spot in my heart, preferably the Burton films. Now, I'm not really a Tim Burton guy. I just think, the way he presented that character and brought Batman out of that Adam West campy kind of vibe that we knew him from the 60s, he was the right man for the job. Yeah, I do have a lot of Tim Burton movies in my collection, but I'm not obsessed with Tim Burton. He might have given us some, he gave us Batman in 89, and that was just excellent. And, Michael Keaton, he's a fantastic actor. He was the right man for the job. And that movie, the dark griminess of that movie and the settings of it and the way it was portrayed, it was fantastic. And this is another thing that a lot of people my age, a little younger, might think is kind of weird, but yes, Jack is my Joker, not Heath Ledger. Heath Ledger, God rest his soul, a great performance in that movie we'll talk about, but Jack Nicholson, once again, one of the greatest actors of all time. Jack Nicholson is my Joker, alongside, Cesar Romero from the 60s. He was more of, maybe comic book accurate, if you want to say, and then Mark Hamill from the cartoon, a legend, of course. But it's not just because I'm more of a Batman 89 fan than, let's say, The Dark Knight, but it's, Jack Nicholson, he was my first real experience with the character, him and Caesar, But, we'll also get to our other Joker in a little while, another fantastic performance, but it's excellent. Batman 89 is probably in my top 20 favorite movies of all time, and I'm a casual casual superhero fan, It's awesome. It's a great movie, and, I really, really like Batman Returns as well. I mean, Michelle Pfeiffer, the definitive, whatever. I don't care. Yeah, if you think Anne Hathaway or that girl from the other Batman movie, whatever. Michelle Pfeiffer brought that sass, brought that character to life. Good God, that suit. Holy moly. Just blew it out of the water. Danny DeVito is the Penguin. Oh my God. Just that movie, Batman Returns from 1992, definitely feels like more of a Tim Burton kind of movie that just has Batman in it. But I still really like it. I still like a lot of the plots and Max Schreck. I don't even know if that character, Christopher Walken's character, was a comic book character, if he was a villain in the comics or not. I have no idea, but that was a jam-packed cast with a lot going on in there, and it does kind of suck that we didn't get a true sequel to that, because then we went to, what we got with the Schumacher films, and Joel Schumacher. I don't blame Joel Schumacher for the campy cheesiness that we got in Forever and Batman and Robin. I do think that it was just, they wanted to sell toys, which, good Lord, I had plenty of them. I had all the toys from Batman Forever, all the toys from Batman and Robin. Don't get me started, of course. Joel Schumacher was, rest his soul, was a fantastic filmmaker, and I've heard rumblings over the years that there's a Schumacher cut out there, and I do think Val Kilmer was a fantastic Batman and Bruce Wayne. Not necessarily as good as Michael Keaton, in my opinion, but was definitely fantastic. Chris O'Donnell coming in as Robin, that was freaking great. I mean, you had Tommy Lee Jones and Jim Carrey, it is what it is. We got what we got, and that's it. Can't do anything about it. And then Batman and Robin, yes, I'm not going to lie. Batman and Robin is an example of a guilty pleasure. It's a shithole dumpster fire of a fucking movie, but I'm not going to lie. I loved that. I loved that movie as a 5-6-year-old kid. Not movies like Freddy's Dead. Not movies like Jason Goes to Hell. Some of those later Hellraiser movies. I mean, Halloween Resurrection wasn't out yet, but yeah, I was a huge Batman and Robin fan as a little kid. It was fun, oh my God. Arnie. All right, if I could make one thing about that movie, maybe a little bit more interesting. Okay, Arnie, get out of that freaking Mr. Freeze costume and be Bane. That could have been interesting. And then have like a who would have been, some like a Patrick Stewart or something. We'll talk about him, with X-Men, have a Patrick Stewart as like a Victor Freeze, a Mr. Freeze kind of character, a less bulky, masculine kind of guy who looked more like a freaking robot in that fucking suit. It was crazy. And then Uma Thurman just having that sexy woman as freaking Poison Ivy, and it is what it is. It's just camp on all levels, and of course it just killed the genre for a long time. It really did. And then we, in 2005, I think I was 13 when Batman Begins became a thing, and I went and saw that in the theater. Me and my brother went and saw that, and I thought that was a really interesting take, because, again, I had no freaking idea who Ra's al Ghul and Scarecrow really were, and all this and that, just from, like, the cartoon and stuff, but I didn't really know too much. Christian Bale, I saw him in American Psycho. I had no idea who the hell he was, but that was a fan. There's no denying that's an excellent film, along with The Dark Knight. And, just one of those trilogies, one of those all-time great trilogies. I'm not going to go into too much detail on those three movies, because I don't love them on the same level, because it's not as nostalgic for me. The childhood nostalgia is not there for the Dark Knight trilogy as it is for those earlier 90s and the 60s Batman kind of thing, So it is what it is, but, they're all three of them solid. Very, very solid. Very interesting. And I think the same thing with Spider-Man. The Raimi trilogy. Sam Raimi, once again, one of those all-time great filmmakers. If it wasn't for Sam Raimi, what wouldn't us horror fans have? What would we not have? What is it? Oh, yes. The Evil Dead. Exactly. Sam Raimi is responsible for one of the greatest horror franchises of all time, and he brought Spider-Man to the big screen, and it was epic. I was 10, 11 years old when the original Spider-Man came out, and yeah, I'm not going to lie, it was fucking awesome. It was great. Tobey Maguire was a great casting. I didn't care about Kirsten Dunst as Mary Jane. I didn't care about that too much. She wasn't one of my girls growing up. I wasn't in love with her like others. But, James Franco is a great actor. It was awesome. William Dafoe as the Green Goblin was fantastic. And then Spider-Man 2, having Doc Ock in there. And then, Spider-Man losing his powers. And then in Spider-Man 3, that's where it gets a little for me. It was cool to see Venom in there, but why Topher Grace? Why the hell bring Eric Foreman to be Venom? I mean, you saw Venom in that 90s cartoon. Eddie Brock was this big, masculine, tough guy, and Venom was this badass fucking character that you thought was just going to tear shit up, and it was just a joke. And then it confused me a little bit with the Mary Jane and Gwen Stacy thing, because I thought it was like, correct me, any of you comic book guys out there, please explain to me, like, I didn't know they existed in the same universe, so that kind of confused me a little bit. But, that Raimi trilogy, I love it. It's great. Yes. It's awesome. I like these movies that I've talked about so far, I own. I own those Batman movies and the Raimi trilogy. I will say that my superhero collection is probably the smallest out of the thousands of movies that I do own. I mean, I've only done a collection of my horror movies, but I have a very large collection of films, and I'm not embarrassed or ashamed to admit that my superhero collection is very limited. There's not a lot in there. It really isn't, but I don't think it makes me any less of a fan. It just makes me a different kind of fan. Just like if you're not as obsessed with Scream as I am, who am I to tell you that you're not a big fan? Who am I to tell you you're not as crazy as I am? Just because you don't breathe it, live it, need it, and everything else like I do. It doesn't make you any different than I am. But, I mean, then we got those Amazing Spider-Man movies in like the 2010s, I think, something like that. I don't remember exactly when. I remember seeing them. I believe I did see them in the theaters, and I thought they were all right, kind of cool. But I was more disappointed. I'm like, where's Tobey Maguire? Why aren't we getting a Spider-Man 4? Why is Sam Raimi not at the helm? That's what drove me crazy, like 15 years ago, kind of thing. You know, it is what it is. But when it comes to Spider-Man, there's the new guy, Tom Holland, I think, who's done those other Spider-Man movies as of late, and I saw the most recent one from like 3 or 4 years ago. I can't even remember the name of it. But I saw it because they brought everybody back. It was kind of like a best hits thing, and I was like, oh, this is sick. All right, awesome, whatever, I'm down with this. But I could say the same thing about the next superhero I want to talk about, and that's Superman. Now, this is where it's going to get a little interesting with Superman, because again, I'm still a young man. I'm still a guy in his 30s, but I'm very, as I'm sure you've gotten the vibe, I'm more of a classic kind of guy. So just as long as everything else, Christopher Reeve is my definitive Superman. Margot Kidder is my definitive Lois Lane. Well, her and one other person we're going to talk about. But, I mean, Gene Hackman, rest in peace, along with another man we'll talk about soon, Lex Luthor. That's just how it is. The Christopher Reeve Superman movies are what I grew up on, is how I was introduced to Superman as a character. As cheesy and campy and corny as they were, I don't care. It's just, you know, my older brother showed me those, and I'm like, oh, this is cool. All right, I can be down with this. I didn't care so much. It didn't bother me. So I think there was a Superman movie that came out like 20 years ago. I probably saw it on TV once or twice. I'm like, whatever. I have never seen Man of Steel, so I don't know what Henry Cavill's take on Superman is, and I had no interest in seeing the James Gunn Superman movie from last year, or this past year, whatever it was. I heard some awesome things about it, but I have never gotten around to seeing it. Along with like the Justice League movies and Avengers movie, I've never seen an Avengers movie. That's crazy for me to say, but I have no idea. I've never seen one. Never seen Justice League, none of that stuff. I don't know. Unless you count the Spider-Man movies, the old ones, I've never seen a Marvel Cinematic Universe movie. Same thing goes with DC. I think the newest DC movie I ever saw was Joker, and I saw that because of Joaquin Phoenix, and because it was like a standalone, character-driven story on just the Joker. It had nothing to do with Batman or this or that or anything else, and that felt more psychological, and it piqued my interest. So yes, of course I'm going to see that. But when it comes to those movies, that they've ruled the universe for the last 20 plus 25 years, whatever you want to put it, you know, but I haven't seen any of them. I mean, X-Men, loved the 90s cartoon, loved the movie from 2000. Maybe like the second one was pretty good, you know, that with the old cast there. I think what's his name? Hugh Jackman, I think, is still Wolverine to this day. But that's pretty awesome if you ask me. But otherwise, I don't know much. I don't. I don't know. I never got into that expanded interest of it. But it doesn't mean I don't like it. I just never dug into it as much as other things. And like I said about, you know, there's other superheroes out there that I've never even heard of that are getting movies and this and that. Like, of course, I've heard of like Daredevil and the Incredible Hulk, Wonder Woman and the Flash and all this and that. I know who they all are. I just don't know their backstories and all the deep details. But something funny that I want to say, which is going to be kind of like hypocritical towards what this video is all about, is I consider myself a very, very casual superhero fan. But funny enough, my all-time favorite television show in the history of forever is Smallville. I mean, I was 10 years old when I saw that. I knew of Superman from Christopher Reeves movies and the cartoons and shit like that. I never got into comic books overall. Just, I haven't really talked about that too much. I wasn't a comic book kid, so maybe that is a big, big reason for why I'm not a huge superhero guy. Maybe. But yes, Smallville, since it was released 25 years ago, it just something about it grabbed me from day one all the way through the next 10 years. Smallville, I mean, just the origin story of Clark Kent becoming Superman. I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the characters and the development. John Schneider in there as Jonathan Kent, just that Dukes of Hazzard, it was great. Just that he was Annette O'Toole, fantastic castings in there. You got, like I said, in my opinion, probably the second, depending on what day maybe number one, depending on how I'm feeling, is Michael Rosenbaum as Lex Luthor. Between him and Gene Hackman, flip a coin. The sass and charisma and deep intelligence he brought to that character was awesome. Tom Welling was great. I mean, it was because of Tom Welling in Smallville of why I was so excited in 2005 to go see the Fog remake. And I remember walking out of the theater ready, just I don't even want to rethink that. I'm not even gonna go back to that memory. It's just brutal. Never gonna talk about it. Never gonna think about it ever again. But something about I could rewatch Smallville every day for the rest of my life. I remember when I first met my wife and I got her to watch it with me. She was into it. She really likes it, and she doesn't mind if I have an episode on in the background. I mean, she gets a little bit more, excitement out of that than watching a horror movie every day. So that's cool, And just all those origins of those different characters and different villains that, I don't know very, very much about, but I didn't feel as if I needed to be a superhero fan to enjoy that show. But it never really, my love for Smallville never really got me to look into the other shows. I think The Flash had a show, and Daredevil, and I'm sure there's some Marvel shows out there that it never got me. Green Arrow, I think, had a show, and yes, the Justin Hartley, he was a great Green Arrow in there, and the Young Justice League shit that we had in Smallville, that was fucking great. And Erica Durance is Lois Lane. Okay, all right, she won't top Margot Kidder, but she was awesome, absolutely awesome. But the love for Smallville never really got me intrigued to look at other superhero television shows, just because I don't know much about anything else. I think they made a Batman TV show about the villains. I think it was called Gotham. I never got into it, never looked into it, never given it a shot, so I can't judge it. I can't judge any of these other properties and shows or characters because I don't know much about them. So it's weird, but I just thought I think it's interesting to let you guys know what I think about the superhero genre as a whole. I mean, I have a very, very small physical media collection when it comes to my Marvel and DC properties. There's no denying that. But if they reboot or do a legacy sequel of, if they ever, let's put it this way, if they ever made a Batman Beyond movie, if Tim Burton ever did something like that where Michael Keaton comes back as an older Bruce Wayne and trains a young Batman, I remember that cartoon was badass and emo badass goth shit when I was 10 years old, or friggin' 9, 10 years old. I'm like, this is pretty awesome. Why not? I'm down for this. I've always wondered that would be very, very interesting. If they ever did that, I don't think we're ever going to get that, but hey, it doesn't hurt to hope. And it's fun to watch yeah, like because a lot of the horror guys, a lot of the big YouTube channels that I watch, they're pretty big superhero fans as well, and they have some definitive, strong feelings and opinions on things, and it's fun to look at it from different lenses. It's interesting, and Dane, if you're watching this, I knew you were. I could tell just by seeing all your collections and stuff, and seeing the way you talk and the way you act. You're definitely a big super. You're just as big of a superhero fan as a horror fan, and it's just different for me. I'm just a little bit different, I guess, but I'm not opposed to it. I have nothing against maybe sitting down and watching the Avengers movies one day, or trying a Justice League or this or that or any of these other films that I've never even thought to try. Uh, Same goes for like, all right, I don't want to forget about this. A comment that I've gotten very many times on my horror movie collection videos is, "Where's Blade?" Yes, I forgot. Yes, Blade is a Marvel property, and I do own all three Blade movies. They're just not in my horror collection. Blade the vampire, half human, half vampire, whatever he is. I don't know exactly. I didn't know Blade was a freaking comic book character when I first saw those movies. I just thought it was a badass fucking thing. I'm just a bit, I'm not a big vampire fan. I love the Lost Boys, and you know, like Abigail was great a couple of years back, and Fright Night and shit like that. But like Blade was just freaking awesome. And it wasn't until after that I found out that he was a superhero or a Marvel character. I had no fucking clue. But yeah, I enjoy the Blade movies for what they are. And I do own them. They're just not in my horror collection. I know a lot of people can classify Blade as a horror movie. I just don't have it in there. I have it probably next to Batman or something. I have no idea where it is on my rack. It's somewhere. But I think really that wraps it up. I mean, when it comes to the superhero genre, it's really what I'm really definitively in love with are those kind of more original adaptations in the '90s cartoons. And yes, I'll watch the '60s Batman cartoon. I could watch that, or older Spider-Man cartoons, shit like that. Just nothing really nowadays. I never really got into that too much. But that's just kind of the fan I am, and like I said, I'm not ashamed to admit that. It's just how I turned out. And if you have any suggestions for a casual fan like me, any suggestions of good entry superhero movies that might not overwhelm me with a bunch of crazy plot holes that I won't understand, or stories, just maybe like a standalone. Hey, I could be cool to give it a shot. Any recommendations or this or that, or with TV shows, movies, whatever, Like and subscribe if you haven't already. And like I said, I really wanted to just branch off and talk about something different. And I want to try to do that a little bit more often, because I know talking about horror over and over and over again can get a little stale, a little bit boring. That is primarily what this channel is based off of, but I know that there's other things out there, and superheroes is one of them. That's why I wanted to talk about that today. So until next time, you all take it easy. We will see you soon. Peace out.